Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today we're going to be making some quilling paper aster flowers. For the main petals of the flowers, I'm going to be using this lilac from Quilled Creations that's 1/8 inch wide, and I also have some deep yellow here, also from Quilled Creations, that's going to be a little wider at 3/8 inch wide. I am going to be using some of my soft pastel here, this color in particular, sort of a brick red, just to color up that deep yellow a little bit later and give it some more dimension. I'm going to be making the petals on this Super Looper quilling comb. I picked this one because I like the really tight teeth on the small side. I do have my Elmer's glue wall in my needle nose container. You're going to need a quilling tool, so grab either a slotted or a needle tool, whichever is your choice. Small scissors, we're going to be doing some fringe work. Tweezers are always going to be helpful. And I am going to be using tacky glue for one part of this project, so if you have that available, go ahead and grab that. And then we are going to be building our flower on top of our parchment paper covered workboard. So that is also going to come in handy. We're going to start off by making our petals on our quilling comb. And if you've followed me before, you've seen me use quilling combs a lot in the past, and I normally do a couple of rounds on my needle tool to make sort of an anchor as a starting point. I'm not doing that this time because I don't want the extra bulk. So all I'm doing is holding a tiny bit of my strip of this lilac paper on the back, about 2 teeth up, or about 1/8 of an inch maybe, wrapping it around those 2 teeth so my strip is on the bottom again, and then continuing up from there. So again, instead of making an anchor, I'm just wrapping the strip around 2 teeth to start, and then at this point I'm just going to add 1 tooth every time, wrapping from front to back over and over again. Notice I didn't add any glue at this point. You're welcome to. The friction of the paper itself will hold this together, so you don't have to, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can add a dot of glue here and there to keep this together. We're going to continue this pattern of adding 1 tooth at a time until we get up to, on this comb, 9 extra teeth, not counting the first one. So 9 loops all together. A helpful tip if you're making multiple quantities of the same type of pattern on your quilling comb, you can use some sort of marking system on the plastic part that might help you be a guide of how many teeth so you don't have to count every time. If you really want to, you can mark the teeth themselves. I just tend to count over and over again. Once you make a lot of these, you can kind of eyeball exactly how big your piece is going to be at the end. So at this point, I have counted all my teeth. I know I've got the size I want, and I'm tearing the excess off right at the bottom. I have found on this particular pattern, if you tear the paper and glue it on either side of the petal, it will kind of pull a little bit, and it won't have the same exact look. The glue kind of pulls to whatever side it's glued on. So I found that having the glue right at the bottom is really what you're looking for. So at this point, we have a shape that looks about like this. Depending on the size of the teeth and how far apart they are in your comb, it might look slightly different, but this petal overall is about 1 inch long, maybe a little bit longer than 1 inch. And I'm squeezing it all the way from end to end, but I'm being really careful not to make either side a point. I just kind of want it to look sort of even all the way across. And that is about the look I'm going for. These flowers have quite a few petals on them, so you're going to be making a lot of those. We'll go over that later. Now we're going to make the center of the aster flower, and I have this 3/8 inch wide deep yellow. This is from Quilled Creations. And I found that about half a strip of this paper, which is about 9 inches or so, ends up being a good size for the center of our flower. And I have also added color to my quilling projects with paint and with different kinds of makeup, markers, lots of other ways. Today is a different technique, so like I said earlier, I have a soft pastel here, or you could use chalk if you have that available. But it's a really nice deep brick red. The center of Aster flowers kind of have multi-colors to them, especially the variety that I'm making today, where it's sort of a nice dark yellow, but then it's got a little bit of red coming through from the bottom. So you can see what I'm doing here. I laid down a piece of paper towel just to make sure I didn't get this all over my workstation, but I'm just adding some color mostly on the bottom half. And then I'm using a cotton round here, but you can use your fingers or whatever else you like, kind of rubbing it out a little bit, making it look a little smoother. I am going to want it to be a little bit darker on the bottom than what it is now, so I'm going to go in with a second round of the pastel, again really focusing on the bottom half. So you can already see the top is still mostly yellow. It's got a little bit of that red peeking through, but then at the bottom I've really got it nice and dark red. And I'm going to do this to both sides of the paper because this is going to be fringed and rolled up, and if you only do one side, you'll really be able to see the difference. So I'm going to do the same exact thing to the other side, and then we'll be able to start fringing the center. At this point, I am pretty happy with both sides of my yellow here. The red is nice and deep at the bottom, and then it kind of fades out, almost an ombre sort of look here. And now I'm going to take my small scissors and I'm just going to fringe, actually starting from the other side, make a real tight fringe, trying to get about 2/3 of the way through this paper, right until it gets to be that dark red. And I'm making the fringe as tight as I can. I'm a big fan of using scissors to fringe. I don't like the machines. I have a whole video about the pros and cons of each technique, and this is, for my sake, what I've landed on, just to be the most consistent. It does take a little bit more time, but I like the result this way the best. So I'm fringing all the way down, and I just want to note also, this is going to be sort of a messy project. If you are using the soft pastels or a chalk, you're going to get it on your hands. So I would make sure that you're doing the center and then washing your hands. You can see that my fingers, just from holding it while I fringe, already has red all over it. So bear with my messy hands for a second, because even if I keep washing them, they're going to keep getting messy. I have my slotted tool at this point, and I'm just going to roll this all the way up from end to end. If you prefer the needle tool, you are welcome to. I find the slotted tool works a little bit better with fringed work. It just seems to be a little bit more gentle and really can grab that non-fringed end without kind of tearing up anything else. So we've gotten to the end. I'm going to loosen this up a little bit, and then just going to glue down the tail. It's okay if your fringed center isn't a perfect circle. The fringe sometimes will have it go a little wonky, and that's okay. It will all look right at the end. Get that to stay a little bit, and then I'm going to get it set up on my board. Let's press this down. There we go. Okay. Feel good about that. That's nice and secure. So at this point, I have my workboard here. I mentioned earlier, this is how we're going to build our flower. This isn't necessary. You are welcome to do this on any surface you like. I just find This way I can use pins and get everything to stay where I want it. Just put a pin right down the center of my flower center, right in the middle of our board. Wash my hands, no more red on my hands. And you can see now I have a ton of those little flower petals. These strips themselves are about 18 inches long. You can really only get one out of each strip, and then you're going to have some extra for another project. If you really want to, you can glue those extra pieces together to make more petals. I did do that a few times to save myself some paper, but you can just make one petal out of one strip if you'd rather. So now I am gluing my petals to my center. I am gluing the side that we didn't start on the quilling comb, if that makes sense. So the side that we started on the quilling comb, where most of the loops are, that's going to be away from the center. And I prefer to do opposite sides first, get those pinned in place, and then fill in the gaps. I'm sure there's an exact number of petals for these flowers. I'm just eyeballing and filling them in. I ended up with about 13 to 14 for each of the flowers I did. We're actually going to be making 2 layers of these. That's why I still have a lot of petals left over. But at this point, we're still working on the first layer. Just a dot of glue on the end and just get the whole thing filled in. Notice that I have not done anything with the fringe center as of yet. I still want that to be nice and tight because we're going to be gluing another layer of petals on in a moment. And if the fringe is sort of puffed out and fringing, it's kind of hard to get the petals exactly where you want them. So I'm going to get my last petal here. Everything is more or less nicely spaced out. This one can be a little wider. There we go. So that's about what we're looking for now. I'm going to let that dry for just a minute. I'm going to grab my tacky glue and we're going to start putting on the next layer of flowers. So I'm going to be gluing the same end that I glued earlier so that everything is kind of cohesive. And I'm going to put these between the 2 flowers on the bottom. So I put a little bit of tacky glue, see, a little bit of tacky glue on the end and a little bit of tacky glue on the underside where it's going to hit the 2 petals beneath. And I just start stacking them up. Just right between the 2 petals underneath. And let's get these pins out of the way here, just make life a little bit easier. And I have my next petal, a little bit of glue on the end, a little bit of glue on the underside, and get that setting up between. Now, sometimes your petals might be just a little too wide to hold up the one on top. That is okay. I'm going to add just a little bit of glue underneath here just to give it a little bit more of an anchor to stay. But I am going to just put a pin in here, and that way it will really stay where I want it to. I could hold it for a few minutes, but let's make it easier. Just get that to stay just like that. Okay, that will work. And now we're going to move on and just keep doing the same thing, filling in the spaces between the petals on the first layer. And there is our last petal on the second row. And that is our little aster flower. I really like how having the petals offset from each other, it gives the illusion of even more petals. So it really makes this flower look very, very full, even though we only have about 20 petals there. And then when you feel comfortable and everything seems dry, you can go ahead and just separate out your fringe a bit. This is a little on the early side. You can see the glue there. You can see it's still wet, but I just wanted to show how you would go about doing that. So here we go. Mine now is mostly dry, and I really can push this fringe out. It makes it look super open. You can really see that brick red, but still the yellow at the same time. I think that technique of using the pastels really worked on this flower. Here is the same flower, completely done and dry. These are pretty big. There's the underside there. You can always put these on a stem if you want to do that. I have a few tutorials putting flowers on stems, so that's an option. I have pretty good sized hands, and these are almost palm size. These are really pretty big flowers. They're probably about 2.5 inches across. They're pretty big. So a good space filler. I have that dark purple one there, and this is a one of those graduated type colors where part of this strip is white and then it goes into kind of a light bluish lavender color, and I thought that would be fun for this project as well, because asters come in a lot of different colors, and during my research I saw, just like a lot of other flowers, the different colors have different meanings. So not only do you have this pale purple or a darker purple, but there's white and there's pink and there's even some really pretty vibrant red asters that I really liked. So you can use the same technique and make yourself an entire garden. As always, if you have any questions, please leave those in the comment section and I'll answer those as soon as I can. I will also link to all the tools and supplies that I use in the description box for the video. You can look there for a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page also, where you can find some quilling extras. I actually just added a new crafting to-do list printable this week, so you can pick that up. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be around for my next video, and I'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.